Welcome to C2 Forest Sunbird series. I'm Krishna, your host. In this series, we'll talk with different contributors and adopters of Sunbird from the Sunbird ecosystem and listen to them, their first-hand stories around their journey in terms of adopting Sunbird. Sunbird, as you know, is an open source software for the sake of learning and human capital development. Sunbird has 18 building blocks. Each building block is configurable, modular, generic, and is designed for a specific purpose. For instance, if you want a solution to be built, you just need to stitch multiple building blocks and the solution would be live. Sunbird, in fact, is also recognized as a digital public good by the Digital Public Good Alliance globally. Right? Sunbird also powers a lot of population scale initiatives such as Diksha, the National School Education Infra, which has clocked close to 5.1 billion learning sessions and has a reach of 180 million plus students and 7 million plus teachers. And Mission Karma Yogi, which is a capacity building learning platform for all the Indian government officials. In today's episode, we have Nirant, Vishal and Ranvijay from Veranda, and we will be having deep conversations with the team to understand their journey when they've started adopting Sunbird. Welcome to C2 Forest.
Thank you, Krishna, for inviting us to the C2 Forest series. The scale and depth of Sunbird has been truly remarkable in adoption in education and many other fields. We have been fortunate to adopt Sunbird and we are very excited to see what other use cases are built out of Sunbird. We'll just introduce ourselves for the benefit of everyone. I am Nirant Ramakuru. I am an IIT Kanpur alumnus and a serial entrepreneur. Across my multiple ventures, I have worked in automobile, in hospitality, in e-commerce, and right now in education. I currently head the Veranda Labs, which is the technology and product function at Veranda.
Welcome, Nirant.
Thanks, Krishna. Thanks, Nirant. So I am Ranvijay Singh. So I am a computer science graduate with nearly a decade of experience. So I have had the privilege enough to build at-scale softwares from the ground up in the fields of edtech and fintech. So this include master data management, learning management systems, accounting software aggregators, and payment solution providers. I have worked with teams who have built these innovative edtech platforms to the cutting-edge fintech technologies, and currently I head the engineering at Veranda Labs.
Welcome, Ranvijay.
Hi, I am Vishal Verma, an alumnus of IIM Indore. I started my journey as a software developer and later moved to business consulting. For 2 years, I worked on my own startup that focused on helping people overcome the stigma associated with mental health and societal issues. Currently, I am working as a product manager in Veranda Learning, and for the last 8 months, I have been working on Sunbird.
Welcome, Vishal.
Thank you.
Thank you for the introductions. Nirant, can you talk a little bit about what Veranda Learning does, in specific to the problems that you're trying to solve as an organization?
Sure, Krishna. Veranda was conceived in 2018 to provide accessible, affordable, and authentic education to the entire world. Incidentally, Veranda is promoted by the AGS Group, which used to own brands like SSI and Aptech in the past, which were educational leaders in their time. Currently, Veranda, as I mentioned before, focuses to try and solve the problem of providing accessible education through the introduction of technology, through introduction of reaching tier 2, tier 3 markets, providing affordable education by allowing or by using technology in terms of reducing the cost of creating the content or sharing the content across, and giving authentic education by associating with thought leaders and educators who have deep expertise in their field. Talking in more detail about what all areas Veranda is focusing on right now, Veranda endeavors to be in the birth to beyond lifelong learning journey of an individual. Given the speed at which our world is changing, we believe that lifelong journey is the only way to thrive in this ecosystem.
Can you talk a little bit about the problems that you as an organization are trying to solve?
Right. So coming to the problems that we're trying to solve, as I mentioned before, accessible, affordable, authentic education. Going from K-12 to college education to postgraduate education, higher education, and then lifelong learning is where we want to be present. In the current ecosystem and the current scenario, Veranda is solving the K-12 education through our association with a brand called Educare. We are in the college ecosystem through our brand called Veranda Varsity. We are also in the college education through integrated BCom courses that we are launching. In the postgraduate space, we have Veranda Higher Ed, which provides university-associated courses up to a doctorate degrees. In the upskilling space, we have Edureka, which works in the IT upskilling domain. And going to beyond in terms of test prep, we have JKSHA, which provides CA and commerce coaching. We have Veranda Race, which does coaching in the state and central government organizations. We have recently associated with 5 or 6 other brands in the finishing school, employability, and the tech upskilling space through our brands of BSure, SmartBridge, Fire, and Talent.
Now, can you talk a little bit about which sectors as an organization you are playing a key role in, and what domains? That would be great to know.
Right. So as I mentioned, we want to be present from birth to beyond. In the K-12 space, we have partnered with Educare, which works in the K-12 schooling space, providing assistance to schools. Coming to the test prep scenario, we have Veranda Race, which prepares students for government and state government, central government and state government examinations. We also have JKSHA classes, which provides commerce coaching, specifically CA, CMA coaching for us. Coming to the collegiate space, we have Veranda Higher Ed, which works in the graduation and post-graduation market, providing integrated BCom courses and university-affiliated courses up to doctorate degrees. Coming to post-graduation and upskilling, we have Edureka providing IT upskilling and technological upskilling in niche and generalized technology courses. And recently, we have partnered with a few other brands in the employability, finishing school, upskilling, and the private sector training domains through BSure, Six Phrase, SmartBridge, Talent, and Fire.
Great. For empowering learners from birth to beyond, I think that's what you said, is a crazy mission statement, right? Is this a mission statement? Yeah. Is a crazy mission statement. Now, to actually think of building a system and processes, I'm not just talking about the technology, but also the processes, people, and the technology to actually enable this kind of solving this kind of problems is very exciting opportunity to be in. So Vishal, if you can talk about what is the thought process that went with you and your team in terms of when you're looking at what are the options that you need to explore when you're looking at building a system to solve problems from birth to beyond.
Sure, Krishna. As Nirant has already highlighted, our businesses and brands cater to a wide, diverse set of learners and their needs. So we needed a learning management system that has a generalized set of features, but can be configured to specialize for the specific business and learners where it is going to be used. Now, to get such an LMS, we explored 5 different strategies that varied on time, cost, and the flexibility of the system. The first one was generalizing the in-house LMS that we already have and is being used by one of our brands. The second was acquiring an existing LMS from the market. The third was subscribing to one of the popular LMSs, which is renowned and can provide a lot of features that we require. The fourth was building everything ground up. And fifth was customizing an open source LMS to suit our requirements.
Oh, great. So I think the last point probably would have led you to Sunbird, but I would want to know how were you introduced to Sunbird in the first place?
So while we were exploring these 5 strategies or options, we had a discussion with Mantra Labs. They had worked on Sunbird in the past and they spoke highly of Sunbird, its flexibility, the scale at which it can operate, and its capabilities. So that is when we came to know of Sunbird and started exploring it.
That's great to know, Vishal. As an open source maintainer, hearing one of the community members recommending Sunbird when they heard about the requirements that you had, that just made my day. Thank you. Right. So what were your first impressions of Sunbird?
We were impressed by the scale at which Sunbird adopters were already operating at. So you have already highlighted Diksha's numbers. It also provided a lot of generalized set of features as we required, which were configurable for the business's needs. For example, N-level nesting in courses, a powerful configurable assessment engine, reusable content, etc. One of the best things we found about Sunbird was that it was open sourced under MIT license, which allows us to make customizations and commercialize based on our requirements.
Those are great set of insights, Vishal. I would also be keen to know from Ranvijay, who's the tech brain behind, while evaluating Sunbird at least, right? What were your first impressions about Sunbird?
Yeah. So when the problem was introduced to us, right? So we were very clear on the vision of the system, that what kind of system that we want. So basically, we wanted a system that should be a microservices architecture and built on the principles of loose coupling and basically non-blocking, right? And yeah, so scalability was a major consideration in that case. So when the team introduced me to Sunbird, right, we went on and checked the technical architecture of the Sunbird building blocks, and that is when that we decided this is something that we should go after, right? And then rest is history, right? So we started adopting Sunbird and exploring it, and then that's how we started on Sunbird. Yeah.
Nirant, can you briefly talk about the thought process that you and your team had in mind when doing the decision making?
So when we were going about trying to go about the 5 options that Vishal spoke about, we looked at it through 3 specific lenses. 1, flexibility, scalability, and executability. We needed flexibility because given the types of associations and brands that we have as part of the Veranda ecosystem, we needed a system which we can flex and compress based on the different use cases that we have. Coming to scalability, we have already partnered with a lot of skill development organizations in state and central government level. Incidentally, we trained 2.5 lakh students as part of the Nan Mudalvan initiative in association with Tamil Nadu Skill Development Corporation. So having operated at this scale, and Veranda currently trains about 1 million students a year across all of its brands. So given that this is the scale that we are operating at, we needed something which was proven at scale. The third point was executability, something that which we could at a low cost within a given timeline get into adoption and assimilation fast into the entire ecosystem. So these were the 3 specific lenses which we looked at while exploring all the options that we had. I would like Vishal to sort of walk you through about how these lenses and the 5 options that we considered helped us.
And Vishal, while you are answering that question, I would also be keen to know, across these 3 dimensions of flexibility, scalability, and executability, how did you zero in on Sunbird?
Sure, Krishna. Let's go through the 5 strategies one by one. So the first was generalizing the in-house LMS. Now, it gives us good flexibility and good scalability, but the thing is, it is very, very specialized towards the needs of one specific organization. If we have to change the feature set of this LMS to suit the needs of other businesses, it will be a humongous task, which will be expensive and time consuming. Now, the second was acquiring an existing LMS. Now, the challenge with that is also similar, with the added time complexity of finding an LMS which can cater to these set of requirements. The third was subscribing to a SaaS-based LMS. Now, in terms of time to launch and in terms of cost, this is the cheapest option out there. But the issue is that we completely lose out the ability to make any modifications or customizations which our learners and our businesses will require. So that option was immediately rejected. The fourth was building ground up, but in this option we get the maximum control. But there are 2 challenges with this. First is that the scalability will improve iteratively over time. And the second is this would turn out to be the most expensive option among all the 5 options. And the last option was customizing an open source solution, in which we analyzed all the leading open source LMS platforms available in the market, and Sunbird came out on top for a few reasons. First was that it is built on microservices, and when we delved deeply into how Sunbird operates, we saw that it is based on configurations, and the configurations can be changed to suit any business needs. Additionally, its scale was already proven, and when it comes to time to launch and cost, compared to the other expensive options, it reduced the time and cost by more than half for us. So it was an easy victory for Sunbird.
Oh, great to know that. Nirant, you briefly talked about when you were explaining about the business use cases, you mentioned every tenant is a business vertical and there might be sub-businesses within a business, right? And your reach was from birth and beyond, right? And what kind of extensions have you done on Sunbird to actually enable this, very diverse set of workflows?
Right. So Krishna, when we looked at Sunbird, as Vishal mentioned, the Sunbird obviously came out on top in terms of adopting an elements that we needed for the use cases that we had and the lenses that we wanted to sort of use to make this decision. Coming to extensions and customizations that we had to do to cater to specific use cases, we needed something which was multi-tenant, not only at an application level, which Sunbird obviously is. We needed something which could operate in a multi-tenant model at an infrastructure level. Given our brands are individual entities within the conglomerate ecosystem, we needed data segregation. We also needed their services to be separate to each other while operating out of a common sort of a system. So we needed DevOps-based infrastructure multi-tenancy. The second customization that we needed, and which we're most excited about, is having an advanced consumption table. So like I mentioned earlier, going from birth to beyond, we also operate across dimensions of offline education, online education, hybrid, classroom, self-paced, and so on. Having such diverse set of learners, cohorts, and groups which are consuming the courses on our platform, we needed to enable the consumption of the course content, customizable at a learner level, at a batch level, and entirely at a course level. So we created an advanced consumption table which is configurable at all of these levels. The third system that we had to create was Sunbird comes with a role-based access control to the entire ecosystem. Given the dynamic nature of business we are in, the dynamic nature of roles that people perform in the given startup world these days, we had people who were content creators while also being content approvers. We had people creating specific parts of the content and not the entire courses. We had people who are course directors and curriculum directors who are creating curriculums but may not be actually creating a course. So we needed to create a user-based access control to the entire Sunbird ecosystem. I'll hand it over to Ranvijay to give you more details about the technical implementation of how we went about these.
All right. So thanks, Niran. So So to start with, I'll start with multi-tenant systems, right? So in the current market, we have SaaS-based implementation in almost all the edtechs. So we were very clear that we do not want this application-based multi-tenant systems. So we wanted it on the DevOps level. So basically on the infra level, we want the segregation of your tenants and the multiple tenants basically. So what we did was, we identified in the current Sunbird ecosystem, right? We identified the core services, right? And what we did was we segregated it into core services and the extensible services basically, and extensible components. If I tell more specifically, extensible component, wherein what you can do is you can identify a service as a core service and a tenant can extend to that based on the configuration. So the changes that we had to do is like the tenant, when you are launching, right, it should be launched through the configuration files, right? So any number of tenants can be launched with the one service with different configurations. So this is what we are doing. So to do this, what we did is we changed the CI/CD pipelines. We reconfigured the deployment process basically, and we reconfigured the so to say the application configuration basically. So this is what we did in this multi-tenant DevOps-based multi-tenant systems.
I think the great thing that you have talked about in this approach, one is
Right.
configurability, and two is you can localize new capabilities that you are building within a tenant level,
Right.
and then try it out, because each tenant is a business vertical. What may seem as a requirement for a specific business vertical may not be a requirement for the other business verticals.
Right. If you're not changing anything, you need not copy that service
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah.
If you're changing anything, what you can do is you can sparse check out that core service, and you can simply load that configuration file, and you can change it for a that current tenant basically. So any number of changes that you want to do in a service, it can be extensible from the core, and you can do it for tenants.
Yeah, great.
So suppose if that customization that you are doing for tenant, right, and going forward you want it to send it to core service also, that also you can do it basically.
Great.
Yeah. So then again, the core service will have that tenant functionality also in that.
Great.
So this is what you have achieved in this multi-tenant, DevOps based multi-tenant deployments basically.
Phenomenal. I think you are one of the first adopters of Sunbird who's actually looked at multi-tenancy from an infra point of view.
Correct.
And I think this will go a very long way, this contribution, once it comes.
Right.
Yeah.
So coming to the second point, the advanced consumption table. So what we did was, so in the current Sunbird knowledge building block, right, what we have consumption table based on the courses basically. So you have hierarchy created on the course level. So what we did was, so we changed the already existing models, and we changed the logic. So what we did is we introduced two more overridings on that course level. So basically the second one was batch. So you can override the content of course through the batch, and similarly you can override the content of a batch from the user level perspective also. So these two level of iterations that we did on the advanced content consumption, basically the table. So we changed the data flow, we changed the models, we changed the logic, complete logic of that. And so we have, on 3 levels based on priority. What you can do is you can customize the content of a course. You can change the content of a course from a batch perspective, and similar if you want that if a user should be having a different content or a certain content that should be overridden for a user, you can also do it. So customizations at all the level you can do it, basically course, batch and user, based on the priority that you
This is a
decide.
very powerful extension. So we're looking at 3 layers. A course has multiple batches.
Correct.
And learners are in various batches. And the challenges that you have is you have a course, but each batch will have its own business rule, when it
Correct.
opens, when it closes, right? And then the content that is customized for a specific batch, in addition to the course, will again vary as per the batch, right? Although there are multiple batches for a specific course, there is customization at a batch level.
Right.
And the same applies at the bottommost layer, the learner. Like for instance, we four are taking the same batch, and let's say you 3 are star students, whereas I am a laggard. So the teacher can give me specific material, which instructor can provide me specific material. And the beauty of when you are explaining, right, I like the first principles approach that you have taken in terms of saying that all of this is configurable.
So Krishna, to tell you about the visualization that we had in our head when we were looking at this particular piece of the advanced consumption table, we looked at a scenario of, let's say you're in a school. There are multiple levels in a classroom. You have 7th class, 8th class, 9th class, and then you have multiple sections within those classes. Section 9A, Section 9B, Section 9C. There are different teachers who take different subjects for each of these sections. And as you progress in a school, students may be combined from their 6th class to 7th class. They may be divided into more number of sections when they progress, and so on. So we were thinking of this particular use case scenario in our heads when we were trying to figure out a consumption table. That if there is a batch which is doing a particular subject with a teacher, they may require additional content because they are more advanced in their learning or little lagging behind in their learning. Even specific students may need additional content or may not need additional content based on their learning capabilities. So we wanted a consumption table which would work across this particular use case scenario. And if it works in a classroom scenario, we are sure that it works across the world.
So I'll give a very specific example of the consumption table that Niran just talked about. So imagine a mathematics course which has algebra and probability. There are 2 different classes of students, or you can say sections of students who are doing that mathematics course. Now it's possible that the teacher of section A, for example, is giving an algebra test to the class on 1st of Jan. But the teacher of section B is giving the same test to the different section, say section B, on let's say 1st of Feb. So it's the same course not being republished, but 2 batches are able to give the same test or do the same content at different points in time. Now let's take another example. Let's say in section A there is a student who met with an accident or fell sick and could not attend the test on the specific day. So what this consumption table allows is that instead of changing the date for the entire batch, the date can be changed for just that specific student. So 1st Jan, section A, everyone else gives the test. On let's say 5th Jan, this single student is giving the test. Now this is an example just for dates, but the consumption table also has features for locking and unlocking, giving a date window to specific items, adding custom content where let's say the live classes which section A is doing is accessible to only section A. The live class which section B is doing, the recording for that is available only to section B. Now I want to stress again on the part that we are not changing the course. We are not republishing the course. We are not editing the course. These are all overrides on content, on date that are being managed at the batch level or at the learner level.
Right. So coming to the third point, right, user and course control. So generally what happens in a system, so if you have to implement anything related to role based, right, so people implement it as RBAC, so role based access permission. So this is something that we did not want it. So we wanted to have a control on the user feature permissions, basically what kind of permission that he needs. So to implement it, what we did is we introduced a new service. Basically we call it a permission management service, and so this is entirely a different service, but we are stitching that into the existing services as a middleware. So whenever any request pass throughs, right, so what the middleware does is it checks the specific permission of that user, it binds into the request, and it sends to the other service that it is interacting with. So this kind of implementation that we have included it in the user and course control. So yeah,
great. So I'm just tying it back to what Nirant said in the beginning. He said user-based, role-based access probably works in a mature ecosystem.
correct.
But in your ecosystem, where things are very dynamic, you would rather want the accesses and the privileges to be defined at a user level, so that it's not locked to a specific role, and also you can have a mix and match of lot of access privileges for a specific user, right? Which cannot be defined as part of a role.
So basically, I'm defining it at the root level.
Yeah. You talked about 3 key customizations that were done by you and your team. One was multi-tenancy, not the typical application-based multi-tenancy, but you did it at an infra layer. And the second thing was around the customizations around the batches, to not just at a course level, but a batch level and also at a learner level. The third was around the accesses and privileges, not the traditional role-based access and privileges, but you're going at a user-based access and privileges. Now, both these 3 things have humongous impact on your businesses as well, right? So how are you able to do these customizations in the first place?
So while we have a talented tech team present at Veranda, the Sunbird community proved to be a big help in achieving these extensions. For example, during the initial days, the Sunbird community gave us walkthroughs of different building blocks of Sunbird and how their internal workings are. And throughout our journey, they have been very proactive in explaining or telling us what the best practices are. If we come to them with a question, they will tell us the best way to take things forward or how to do specific things in Sunbird, what the impact will be, and share us the relevant documentation for the same. Additionally, Sunbird also organizes boot camps, which one of which our tech team had attended back in March, which turned out to be a big help for all of us.
So Nirant, now that you have gone through the adoption journey, what is your advice for potential Sunbird adopters? In specific, if you have anything that you may want to highlight, we as a Sunbird community, what is it that we can do better to ease out the frictions for the future Sunbird adopters?
Sure, Krishna. So for a potential adopter of an LMS in general, this is coming from having worked on existing LMSs which were sort of given to us from an existing system, and also on working on Sunbird, is to look at these 5 options that Vishal spoke about before, is customizing an existing LMS that you have, taking an open source and building on top of it, getting into a SaaS model, etc. Is to understand it and look at it through the same 3 lenses that we did: flexibility, scalability, and executability. What the open source Sunbird LMS allowed us to do was to have an extremely high degree of flexibility. This is proven to operate at scale, and the time to market was fairly short given the amount of customizations that we had to do to be able to cater to specific use cases. So my sort of advice to potential adopters would be that look at Sunbird as something that is given to you out of the box, but which may not exactly cater to the needs that you have. Every person is different, every business is different, every need is different. You will need to customize and adopt it for your own specific needs. Coming to the point, we are just a 10-member engineering team which have been able to do the customizations that we spoke about. And so this is a testament to the fact of how easy it is to adopt Sunbird, customize Sunbird, and tailor it to your own specific use cases. For the Sunbird community at large, for potential adopters and for ourselves, what I would like to mention is that we understand that this is an open source, community-driven application. It was built through contributions from hundreds of different people, if not thousands of different people, working across different geographies, demographies, etc. So what we are sort of in the need of, and what we would like to see wonderfully done in the community, is documentation of the technical architecture, the documentation of the code, the commenting, which would help in the adoption of Sunbird much faster. This will help in the engineers who are trying to customize the code, understand the code much better, and sort of lead to a much faster time to market for any LMS that is built out there.
Yeah, I think on the documentation front, if you look at the recent advances in generative AI, I think you should probably look at what can be done to actually on the fly help folks, right?
Yeah.
What kind of a thing which can go through the code repos,
Yeah.
and but then I think the underlying code has to be documented to that level. But in fact, on the documentation point, I think what you said is right. As Sunbird community members, some of the community members have taken this up as a priority item to focus area specifically for the next quarter. And iteratively, I think I believe you would have seen some improvements. We'll see as a community what can be done to actually close this loophole.
Sure. That's wonderful to hear, Krishna. And we are obviously cognizant of the fact of the improvement in documentation that has happened over the last few months. Also coming to the point of deployment, when we had to deploy such a large system as, I wouldn't say complex, but as intriguing and as intrinsically built as Sunbird, it took us some time to understand the deployment cycle, from adopting it to be able to make, create a working copy for ourselves and take it to a point where we can start of the customization.
Yeah. So I think both documentation and deployment as challenges is something that the community has heard about. And then these are the focus areas. In fact, I think probably in the next quarter we should see currently as well. I think the deployment has improved significantly in terms of what you had to face versus the current crop of adopters that we see. But we are taking a very aggressive challenge. The community is taking a very aggressive challenge, saying, can we help adopters deploy Sunbird within a day, right? A production instance. So in fact, what we have also done was, I think a month back, one of the community members rolled out saying, hey, if you want to try out Sunbird in the first place, you can actually do it within an hour.
Oh, wow.
So that is in beta right now, that's rolled out. But for production version, I think we'll spend some more time. Maybe this quarter we'll see that. So Ranvijay, you talked about all the exciting things that you are architecting on top of Sunbird. When can we see these as contributions so that it can benefit the wider Sunbird ecosystem?
Yeah, so we are in line with our development efforts, right? So we are trying somewhere around this quarter to push it in QA. So we understand the value of QA, right? So each and every feature that we have implemented or we have changed in the core business, so that should be properly verified, and verified plus it should be working in such a scalable environment also. So that is what we are looking at. So once the QA is we are by end of this quarter, you can expect, like, so we'll be completing the QA and the development from our side, and by end of next quarter or starting of Q4, you can expect some significant contributions from our side to the Sunbird community.
Great, looking forward to that contributions. Thank you for joining us today in this interesting series. In fact, this is the first series that we have started, the Sunbird series under the C2 Forest umbrella. Thank you folks for joining us. And like you correctly said, growth of the community is not just adding in more capabilities, more code, or more people. It is about who is part of the community and what contributions they are bringing onto the table, or what value are they bringing onto the table. Now this can be a line of code, it can be one line of documentation, it can be one bug that you are fixing, or one capability that you are doing, or just being a very super charged enthusiasm onto the community itself, hosting a lot of webinars, community events, and all those things, right? So we are super glad that we have Veranda as part of the Sunbird community, and we wish to see you contribute to the community and also leverage Sunbird to meet your business requirements. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Krishna.
Thank you.